Hi, welcome to science fiction video lecture number 2, and in this particular lecture I want to talk a little bit about responsibility that you find as kind of a theme in Fellowship of the Rings. And it actually connects with something we're going to talk about a little bit more later, which is about archetypes and common characters that you can find in different kinds of stories all around the world. So first I want to think a little bit about responsibility. And don't forget, you should be taking some notes. So you should have this, everything you see here, in your notebook, which I'll talk a little bit about later in the week. Where you're going to put this into your notebook. And I have this little star here so that you will remember to add your own additional details. So this is kind of my outline. This is all I can fit on this piece of paper, but you're going to add specifics based on what I actually say in this particular video. So back to responsibility, how would you state that as an actual theme? And I always like to broaden sort of one idea or maybe one word into a full sentence. So for responsibility, we could make it even more general, so it could be applied to other types of stories. You could say something like, we all have responsibilities in our own journey of life, and we must find the courage within ourselves to meet the demands of the task. So something like that. You could word it in different ways. But when you word it like that, so it's a little more general, you can see that this is a theme that could fit into lots of different kinds of stories around the world. And when something can be fit into lots of different stories, or stories can fit into it, we call that a universal theme. There's a lot of different kinds of universal themes. How could we find some examples of responsibility in Fellowship of the Ring? And we're not too far into the novel, but even at this point, you can see that there really are quite a few examples of characters asserting that they need to do something. We have Frodo, who's been given the ring, and he realizes that it's dangerous to his friends and to the Shire as a whole if he stays in the Shire with this ring. He doesn't know all of the consequences or the whole big picture, but he knows it's dangerous. We also have Sam, and you can see an example of this when they meet the elves. I think it was the end of chapter 3. And he tells the elves that he's going to stay with Frodo no matter what. He later relays this story to Frodo directly. So we see these characters showing little bits of responsibility to sort of this quest as well as to themselves and the greater world. You'll be seeing more examples of responsibility all the way through. Responsibility relates to a few other types of character traits. One is courage, which is really easy to see because if there's some kind of quest that a character's on, there may be some danger involved. And in the fantasy realm, that's pretty easy to see what kind of danger. We have the evil lurking in the background. There's also another trait that relates, and that is of sacrifice. You usually have to give something up. And maybe it's something tangible like possessions. So we see Frodo getting rid of Bag End in order to move forward on this particular quest or this journey. And there's some other things. This actually connects to, again, what I was saying before about archetypes, which we'll go into more detail, but it's all connected to the journey of the hero. The hero has a number of attributes and traits associated with him or her. Next, I want to think about real-world connections, or actually, I want you to think about real-world connections. And in specifics, these character traits, they're interesting in stories because we tend to like these kinds of traits in people. So as far as the real world, do you see any of these traits, responsibility, courage, possibly even sacrifice, in yourself, people you know? How about world leaders? Do they have some of these traits, or politicians, or people in places of power? And that's what I like to think about is, do we have those qualities in other people? Is that some kind of connection that we can see, or do we wish that they had those types of qualities? So there's a lot of different ways that we can think about real-world connections. The last part, additional resources. which I think is fun, but that's the English teacher in me. I get some of these ideas from the readings by Joseph Campbell, which is, his book's called Power of Myth. He's written some other books as well and done some video series, and he really looks at different kinds of characters or archetypes and how they show up in lots of different stories. And Stuart Wojtyła, who wrote Myth in the Movies, takes Joseph Campbell's ideas and he applies them to different kinds of movies and different kinds of genres. And that stuff's really interesting because all of a sudden it sort of maps out storytelling, and you start to see how these different kinds of scenarios fit lots of different stories that we all enjoy. So I hope you find this interesting and useful, and I hope that you will take these notes and you'll put them in your notebook, and you'll continue to think about them as you continue to read or even see other stories or movies or other books, and you'll start to see how these different pieces pick up in lots of different ways. Thank you for watching. Where do I get some of this information from? And this is Sadie. Joseph Campbell is a researcher who did a lot of work with looking at mythology in many different cultures. And one of his books is called The Power of Myth. So that's one resource. And another resource that I've used, and actually will give you some more information from this, is called Myth in the Movies, and that's by Stuart Wojtyła. Another one of the resources, let's just try the resource again.